Hello there. So this Crush advert, this Apple advert, is a CG. It's been doing the rounds. Everyone seems to be also quite offended by it. We're not really talking about that today, but if you think this is some sort of crushing indictment on corporate America's view of artistic creation and the commodification of such creation, then I don't know what to tell you. I'd probably speak to OpenAI and Stability first. They're much more evil in that regard. Anyway, is this CG? And the real short answer is, no. Mostly. Like, I think a lot of it is a mixture of traditional things captured in camera, especially some of the destruction, with compositing and general tweaks. And maybe a few little areas have been done in CG, but let's have a look and we'll talk about it. Got a lovely little shot here. So this is probably the real opening shot on the real stage. You could do that some other way, but I don't know why you would. The first thing to jump out at me is probably this room does not exist in this form. This is probably a composite. There's a few, and going through this video, I might repeat myself, I always do, I'm doing this on the fly, a tell a lot of the time with making CG things look more real is camera issues, right? They've chosen a softer, more, distorted, a lens that distorts reasonably well and seems old and a bit soft, right? That's the common trick for masking CG as you add camera imperfections. Oftentimes, people in an aid to make things composite better and look more tangible overdo those effects. They add too much aberration, they add too much lens distortion, that kind of stuff. And this could be a case of that, or it could just be an old lens. It's a very good way to make the CG elements blend better if you choose ahead of time to use a lens like this to film with, or even just a normal lens and put the same effect over all of it. We'll see. So this trumpet, I think the crushing of this trumpet is done in camera. That's not to say we can't do this otherwise, and the sort of fidelity of this is definitely possible, and that's a very important distinction to make right now. Is it's not a case of any of this is they can't do this with VFX and CG. It's that they wouldn't, is not because it can't be done. It's because it's too expensive and complicated, and there comes a point where if your video is surrounded around the idea of crushing things, it's a lot of simulation, a lot of very compelling work to get it to this fidelity, which is incredibly, ludicrously labor intensive, to the extent that it'd be expensive even for Apple to do it, if you know what I mean. CG is expensive, and to get it looking this good is very, 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 very expensive. And I know Apple's got deep pockets, but I don't think this advert costs a great deal more than any of their other adverts, is kind of what I'm getting at here. They, if they're saying like, oh, you can either crush this thing for all the stuff for, I don't know, the shoot might cost $35 million. Apple will go, what's that? Oh, that's like the same price as a pint of milk. Go for it. But if you say, oh, hey, we can do this advert, we're doing it all in CG, so you've got all this creative control, blah, blah, blah. It's going to cost $190 million. They're probably going to say no, right? I'm not saying it's going to be that much, but the point is, it'd be very, very, very expensive basically for a minute of very, very high quality CG. Anyway, stop waffling and carry on looking. So I think this trombone is done in camera. This wide shot has a few little tells in it, which make me again feel that this is not CG. It's very well staged. So it looks less plausible, if that makes sense. The fact they've added arbitrary lights pointing directions, the entire layout of the scene makes it feel very like something you wouldn't do in the real world, because obviously you're not going to put all this stuff in a giant crush IRL. That's not a thing. That's not something that happens every Saturday. What do you get up to? Oh, I crushed a bunch of shit in my giant hydro... Actually, no, YouTube, people do that, don't they? Anyway, the point is, they've staged it in a certain way, but there's some tells here. So things like, it's the imperfections, right? Everyone says this. For CG, it's imperfections you look for, which are the tells, which tell you how real or not it may be. And there's a few obvious ones here, like there's handprints on the side of this piano where someone's pushed it into place. That wouldn't necessarily be something desirable, I guess. There's a similar thing with the quality of this paper. If we see, we've got some staining on this paper and some marring on the paper, showing that that's old. Down here, we have the wrist rest on this DaVinci Resolve speed editor keyboard thing and color station. I wonder how much Blackmagic Design paid to have this in the advert. Probably didn't. They're probably just doing them a favor, I imagine. But yeah, we can see the inconsistencies across this wrist rest, which look like it's been made by real use. It'd be a needless thing to put in a scene like this, again, without great, almost wasteful degrees of attention to detail for what amounts to a single second on screen for an asset of this quality. I don't think they'd do it. It'd be decadent, almost. And so this is one of the first contentious ones. So with the actual screen itself, this has definitely been put on in post, or modified at least in post. In fact, I think you can see a slight issue here with a roto, which looks like, I'm not sure, I can't really see on the screen, but it looks like this sort of comes off a little bit early, if that makes sense. You've got a shadow getting cussed across the screen by this space imploder thingy, and it looks like they've not done the world's best job, no they haven't, of rotoing that out. So I think, yeah, they've done these words in post, because you're destroying this thing, this arcade cabinet, and yeah, you can't art direct the point at which it says game over. You can't guarantee the screen won't break straight away. You don't know what's inside there or how it's going to break. So they'll just cut the, like, they'll do the sensible thing, and they'll just put the contents of the screen on in post entirely, because you can control it. You can have it say game over when it hits a certain point in the crush and art direct it. That's a very sensible thing to do in post. In terms of the actual crushing of this thing, this to me looks like a real object. We've got some very obvious tells here. We can see this is going to be plywood, right? And we can see it's broken apart, it's splintered, which is a thing that you might not necessarily have happen in a 3D simulation of a thing doing a thing. But also, if you were to do it, I think it comes back up in this as like the unexpected ways in which things break in real life, and the desire of an artist to generally probably instinctively remove some of that weirdness, because it's not going to happen when they're simulating it in the first place, so you'd have to put a lot of effort to put it in, which would require lots of observation. But things in real life break in unpredictable ways, and part of the thing that sells CG destruction or doesn't sell CG destruction is how predictably these things tend to break. And if you're going to do it in CG, the way you'd art direct it, if you're being very, very careful, is you might add a little bit of that unpredictability or that bizarreness of, when this starts to break, instead of just snapping, part of it splinters up. That's a really good sign, but it'd be a lot of work, a lot of intention, to kind of sell an idea of something breaking in a much more chaotic way than would happen normally in CG. It's not something that most people would even think of doing, is kind of what I'm getting to. Very long roundabout way, but this is real. We can see where this is delaminated, part of this PVC, the plywood, and we can see the layers of the ply. We can also see how some of these parts behind here are deforming. We can see electronics inside here. We can see splintering from the way the wood's broken. We can see how this sort of, I think this is probably like MDF or something, is you can see how it's delaminating the layers, and that's flicking out, and the way this front bit of fascia is peeling back here. This is real. Again, there's also additional unnecessary details in here which you couldn't see before. So part of the front has fallen away. We can see the chocks of wood it's held up with. Indeed, with screw holes. It's not cut level. It's got some paint on it. This is a real object being crushed. So paint. The paint is also, I think, real. It could have been enhanced somewhat after the fact, but the real tell for this, and coming back to this paper, we can see, it's not my screen, it's rubbing my screen to make sure it's, yeah. We can see here reflections inside here, but also we can see marks and scuffs and stuff on the piano. I think the piano is real. But the paint cans are. How do I think? First part of the shot is this one here, where you can obviously simulate fluid spilling out and doing all of this. It's computationally expensive, but it's not something out of the reach of any modern, like, VFX studio. The point is, there's a few bits of reality, again, that there's this extra degree of effort you'd have to put in order to achieve this in CG that they'd just be kind of easier to do otherwise. And there's the first tell is this side here, where a mixture of motion blur and also what's actually happening is when this paint can started to burst, a little bit of this paint you can see is kind of atomized, right? It's, oops, I've actually put the volume on. It's kind of atomized a little bit. Now it's pouring more. You can create that foam and in CG, but it's, again, a lot of effort for such a throwaway shot. It's a lot. But also the real tell here, which you haven't gotten to, is the way these cans burst. There's pressure being applied to all of these, And you can see how they burst out the cans in again, very, very random ways. This is entirely doable in CG, but complicated, difficult. It's far easier to do this in camera. From the looks of it as well, it looks in camera to me. Things like having liquid spurt out is very, very easy. Having the viscosity of those liquids to affect other surfaces and cling to them in a physics simulation is much harder. So what I'm saying is, like, this paper, you have a paint will adhere to paper. That can be simulated to an extent. You can do that, but we have multiple different surfaces here. So we can see as this starts to hit the ceiling, how it starts to bead up and all that sort of thing at different rates. It's I think it's a rig designed in some way to have them burst, but I think this is done in camera. And the randomness of angles and the chaos in the way in which these cans are individually being destroyed. Again, I think they've staged this in such a way that it can be plausibly to look like CG. Probably an artistic decision to make it look less tangible, I guess. I don't know why. Just it's good. It's vibe. But yeah, this looks like it's done in camera. And another note on destruction here: we have the front of this fall off. Again, there might be some mechanisms to ensure this happens, or maybe they had multiple takes and multiple pianos. I don't know. The way that all the sort of piano parts, first you have to model all of this. It's really time consuming. And if you've got a bunch of stuff you're destroying and you can pick the best takes, this isn't like that old Honda advert where the wheel, with the big, I can't remember the name of the machines, the Dunning-Kruger machines isn't the one. The machines where all the parts hit the other parts and they roll together into a thing. One of them. It's not that choreographed, so they can have different objects and they can decide at the end which ones they want to focus on based on the ones which were most interesting when they were getting destroyed, right? And you can have multiple of these setups and do a few of them over and over and pick the most interesting looking cuts. But yeah, doing this sort of level of things bursting, this isn't impossible. Again, it's not, but you'd have to model the entire interior of a piano for half a second's worth of shot. I don't think they've done it. It doesn't even look like it. It looks very real. And it looks like a serendipitous shot of the front popping off and all the keys falling out. So, not much to say here. Here's another instance of what I was saying before with the arcade cabinet. Look at the way this deforms as it gets destroyed. It crushes in a way that is interesting. It's intriguing. The way it sort of warps and peels itself open would not be the way you'd intuitively expect this thing to get crushed. It's a much more interesting experience than we'd expect. But you wouldn't expect this. And also maybe they watch us back and decide, that looks interesting. Maybe there's foreknowledge. Again, I think this is done in camera. It's one of those things where you could go a very long way to art direct the weird ways in which a metronome would deform while being crushed under a giant press. But most artists probably wouldn't think of it. They wouldn't make it look compelling enough or physically plausible enough, or because it reads weirdly and you could see this and be like, I don't really know what's happening here. Or if you're paying more attention, you read it as a very interesting unfurling of an object being crushed. But a lot of people's instincts would be to not art direct it this way if it was done in CG. As it stands, it looks very much, again, like it was done in camera. So here's a very good candidate for something that could very easily, probably more easily be done with CG. This does look pretty damn good. But yeah, it's a clay bust. My assumption with this would be they have multiple takes, and we can see how camera angles change, and a few ones look like the different presses later on as well. But this would be a very good candidate to do in CG. You don't want to have to make multiple ones of this bust. If you have to show it in multiple shots, it's hard for continuity because each one would have different patterns of, you have to stage it very carefully to make sure either you don't see all of this stuff that can't be replicated, or you take your chances, or you just do this in CG. This is relatively easy to do. The deformation is literally, it's getting squidged. This you can do. This is relatively easy actually to do in CG. You can do this with a bunch of modifiers and with a soft body shape or whatever to achieve something like this and art direct it if you really wanted to. Again, my feel is this is happening in camera, and they've just chosen that first thing of not showing this in enough detail in other shots, so you can notice the continuity errors around. You make a second one of these, not going to be identical, but I think they've just gone with it. Here is my real smoking gun coming up, is this camera. So this is this is one of those I am definitely not done in CG. And there's a few really big tells here. This looks to be a particular camera. I think it's like a Canon C camera, I think. It looks like a C300 or something. But anyway, we can see some very, very high quality, what would be very high quality work going on here. So we've got, look at these scuff marks on the plastic. This is something that you wouldn't really think to do. It's a very specific kind of damage to a very specific kind of plastic. A very good CG artist would definitely clock this, but I think it's like glass-filled something nylon fiber that gets shiny as it gets damaged in a very specific way that is familiar if you've ever interacted with this kind of thing. But the real thing is here. So you can see, again, this is peeling and moving in really unpredictable ways. But as it gets destroyed, you can see how the interior of the camera is pushed out, is ejected from inside it. And you can see all the interior components. You can see ribbon cables here. You can see the pogo pins for the lens mount here, or that sort of thing. To do this in CG is so labor intensive as to be not worth its while. You could, let's say this is a $2,000 camera. It'd be far cheaper to do this 4 times and destroy 4 of these cameras. I assume it's broken. I don't know. But yeah, you could destroy a bunch of these cameras. It'd still be quite a lot cheaper than doing this in CG. And the end result in CG would be worse because this sort of chaos is very hard to replicate. It makes a more visually interesting frame, having it being destroyed for real. And also, you'd have to meticulously mold the interior at great human time and expense for what amounts to less than a second shot. This is done in camera. I'd put money on this being done in camera. So here is another sort of like slightly more contentious one. Now I've stopped it here. It looks like this could be for reals, but who knows? We have another instance of they've definitely put this on the screen in post. In fact, actually, they've done quite a bad job because it looks like a very pixelated, low fidelity image they put on here in a very, we can see this sort of jagged edge here. It feels like, I mean, obviously, unquestionably, they've done that in post, but the fact that they've done compared to what the other sort of CG work here would be, a relatively bad job of compositing this is quite interesting. Anyway, so I looked at this previously and thought maybe this could be in CG. We have that same tell thing I mentioned earlier by using soft lenses. So yeah, we've got so much aberration and all this softness around this edge and making these look very unreal. However, now I'm looking at it again, there's a moment in this, I think shortly before it explodes, where it looks a bit more plausible than I originally thought. So we have this sort of buckling at the top here. And yeah, this sort of like side buckling is something you'd probably predict if you're doing this in CG, but I think it's about here. Oops, no, I've missed it. You see a brief moment where the interior of the television kind of pops through. There we go. Kind of pops through. It's very hard to capture the exact frame. Damn it. I now think this is done in camera. In fact, actually, we look at the way it's lit. I think this might have been done on camera, who knows? But this is probably one of this and the bust are the two ones which stand out to me as being the easiest to achieve. And they've both been staged in a way where, see how none of these things really interact with each other? It's quite a simple job to composite this back into frame. But that being said, there's something about the way there we go, I've nailed it. So yeah, all of this stuff inside and all this stuff breaking, they've actually smushed a real TV here. So we can see some logic boards behind here. We can see how some plastic split off and some metal frame behind it, that kind of thing. And a piece is flying out over here. I think this is a real TV, and they've just composite this screen on, again, to art direct it at the end. So, lenses. Let's look at these. What can we see in the reflections? I didn't look at this previously. Can we see things in the reflections? I can't really make out much, and I can't really zoom in on this computer. Maybe they could do this in CG. There's no guarantees that you'll get this explosion coming out effect. That's relatively easy to achieve in CG, to be honest. The guitar exploding, I think it's done in camera. That's thing's been done quite a lot. The paper exploding, we can just see very clearly that the way these are deformed and the quality of these are real notebooks, and that explosion happened. If you've ever watched the hydraulic press channel on YouTube, paper does this under a hydraulic press. Yep, this just looks like the thing it is right now. So we have the squish. And I'm going to say that's also real, but also maybe slightly enhanced with CG. But I'll go into that in a second. So very easily you can stage this so this ball falls off, but we can see there's two cuts afterwards where I think it doesn't land in the right place. So if we stop here, see the way it rolls, it looked previously like it was rolling out of frame. It looks like it kind of rolls. Let's try and get it. There we go. It looks like it's sort of rolling to land over here-ish. So we've got cut 1, which is over here, and cut 2, which is front on, right? It'd be very difficult to stage this. This is why the cuts are there. I think this final ball is real. This one, this intermediary one, the rolling one, might not be. I can't verify, but it looks like there's some details on it that I can't match between the two. But the real tell for this being a real ball here is it's very easy to position one of these at the edge of a press and squish it until it explodes. But the real tell here is the way this is done. Again, it's one of those things where the degree of fidelity here is so high, it'd be so expensive to do, it'd just kind of be pointless to not do it for real, if that makes sense. So if you've ever held one of these squishy stress balls in real life, they're made out of, like, I think it's a polyurethane foam material with a shiny outer layer, which is kind of slightly brittle, right? Not brittle as such, but it breaks, it cracks. And we can see some of that here, as well as like the stuff that you generally catch in CG if you're told to imagine one of these, and if you've seen one in real life that you capture, would be these sort of like molding imperfections around here, you know, this sort of stuff. They're very easy to do with just little bump maps or whatever. You can just, you know, displace it a little bit to show these surface imperfections. Very straightforward. But here's the thing you'd miss is these little fractures, which is a kind of a tell of the material. So you've got this crack here. We've also got mold lines around here, ragged edge from the edges of this would be very cheap Chinese mold. And yeah, around here we can see we've got sort of like imperfections around the eyes. They'd be very, very, very well done, but the cracks are the real tell. So if you squish them these enough, the thing to normally fail in real life is around those fissures where you squeeze it and they start to form. Eventually they spread, and you can see that happening here. You can see those cracks expanding as if they were in real life. That's very, very difficult to accurately. Again, you could do it, but it's something that's so much work and effort. They've just crushed a squeezy ball in this, you can tell. I think the shot before of it rolling into place, I'm not so sure. It seems to be somewhat incongruous between the two. This looks much more like, I mean, if you look on the right hand, the next shot, we can see a difference in the way this eye is mounted here. The angles don't allow you to see necessarily everything from this ball. Like, I can't see a mold line, or maybe just ever so slightly see a mold line. They might have modeled or scanned in the same ball just for that shot to art direct where it goes. That's very plausible. But the final one, pretty sure this is real. You can see the way that the sort of bends out. You can see the interior like structure of the foam a little bit. They've just squished a thing. So in summary, an awful lot of this advert, whether you like it or not, that's just a cannon. That's definitely real. It's just a pressure cannon firing out some crap at the edge of the frame, I think. But yeah, whether or not, and obviously there's like cleanup, there's some compositing work on all of this. I'm not convinced this room, I'm pretty sure this room's probably not real. This floor part probably is. The stuff above here, I doubt it. But yeah, it's mostly done in camera. And whether you like this advert or not, you find it offensive or not, yeah, most of it was done, I think, at least, in camera. Anyway, have a nice day, and that's the end of the video, and goodbye.